Hey, Mike.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Hanging in
Are you
there.
really in the office? No, no,
So
no,
this
no.
is the office, but no, I'm at home. I'm at home.
Yeah, yeah. That
This is what the
guy,
office
that
looks
Yeah,
like,
guy.
though.
he's not moving. That guy is not moving.
Yeah,
That's me,
and I think
actually.
that's you.
Oh, that's
That's
I
you.
you,
know.
right? Well, last time we saw you was
A lot has
Tokyo.
changed since then. A
A
lot
lot
has
has
changed.
changed.
So much. So much.
Gregory,
Good morning, y'all.
Hey, good evening.
it was that
It's
long
been a
ago?
while, Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Greg.
I love
That
it.
was
You got the
for
message on the
equal.
uniform. I get
I
that.
know that.
Oh, that's true.
I didn't get the memo. I didn't
I
get
You
the
didn't
know.
get the memo. Aaron got the memo,
I,
clearly.
I was literally holding a black shirt, and then
No.
I think I'm gonna go white now. So maybe I sense this. Maybe I sense.
Thanks for agreeing to do this with us, guys.
Thanks so much.
But let me just check if this is correct because I just checked your LinkedIn. So Mikey, you're the Chief Creative Officer of Moon Creative Lab, right?
Correct.
Formerly a partner at IDEO.
Yes.
And then now, Greg, you're the Managing Director of IDEO New York, or is it IDEO US?
Oh boy, that would be a big jump. But New York, IDEO in New York for sure.
Okay.
I came over actually after I worked with Mike over in Tokyo. I came here a couple years ago, and now I'm leading the studio here in New York.
Well, before we begin, let me just I think I need to introduce what this is. As I said, this is a free-flowing thing. Um, this is actually the first bootleg speakeasy. It'll be hopefully a series of videos with people that we like. So welcome, guys, to whatever this is.
Thanks for inviting us. First
Yeah,
one.
thank you
Yeah,
so much.
man.
Honored.
When you guys become super famous, you can yeah.
We knew
We'll look
you
to
when.
join your future concerts. Yeah.
So first thing that we wanted to ask, I think all of us are, needless to say, like all of us are connected and are fans of Japan. What do you guys miss about Tokyo or Japan?
Okay, this sounds crazy, but it's not crazy. I mean, last time I went to Tokyo, the first thing I did was went to the konbini and bought a highball in a can. So that's one. Um, they don't have that here. But the thing I actually really do miss compared to living in New York for the last 2 years is the trade-off of really fast pace with calm and chill. And I find
That's
that
true.
in one city in Tokyo, you can experience that minute by minute. Whereas in New York, especially in Manhattan, it's kind of you're surrounded by sort of the bustle of it, and there are pockets, and you can drive upstate here in New York and find that peace. But in Tokyo, what I really appreciated was the marriage of tradition and calm and reflection and community with sort of the super fast pace. So that part, I can feel that as a difference between New York and Tokyo.
Your office in Tokyo is what, like a few minutes away from the park,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
Right.
that's
From
right.
Meiji Jingu.
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
it's so easy to I think that's a great answer, Greg. I agree with
I
that.
mean, there's
It's like,
more. I miss a lot more. Mike, you got a ton. I'm sure.
For me, it's also it's a lot. It's a feeling. So of course, and I'm sure Greg will agree. There we have our favorite like yakiniku places and favorite bars to go to and things like that. But I think the thing I know I miss the most too, and especially now being back in the U.S. a little bit more, is there is just a heightened sense of uh, respect for other people. That it's funny when I now that I've been back in the US a little bit, it's not that people don't respect other people here, but it feels a lot more individualistic, right? It feels like, oh, what do I want? What, I need to do this, I need to do that. Versus when you're in Japan, everything is about the people around you as opposed to yourself. So it's about you
that's
in
true.
service of other people. So that's
That's
why
true.
a lot of people comment about the service and how service and hospitality is so amazing. And it's not even that. It's just anywhere you go, everyone is constantly or unconsciously thinking about the people around them, and that I just miss that. I just miss
I do
that feeling.
too.
I miss that, and especially in a time like this, right, where emotions are heightened and people are scared. It's nice to know when you have a community of people that are constantly thinking about other people. And I think that's what makes a lot of society kind of go forward. So I think that feeling of that is something I really miss.
That's true. Like the mindfulness of people there, no?
Yeah, it's
Mindfulness
interesting
and
because Mike, you hit on something really important. I'm reading this book by an author called David Brooks called The Second Mountain. And this idea of two mountains in the world in your life, where the first mountain is about your own personal success and your own, sort of like ego driving what you want to achieve. And then you hit this valley where it's like, well, what am I doing this for? The second mountain being in service of others. And I think that book came out at a time where we're looking at America, as Mike said, like a lot of individualism, a lot of sort of self-motivation to go do things. But ultimately, the people are starting to find, especially in a time like this, where you can be in service of others. Tokyo and Japan is all about that. I agree with you, Mike. It's such a marked difference in cultures and between America and Japan.
That's like a common thing that Pao and I would always gush about whenever we would be there or whatever. You're walking around trying to figure things out, and a complete stranger would help you.
It makes you also, I mean, for those that, so I think what's so interesting is you talk to a lot of people who travel to Japan, and many for the first time. Everyone starts becoming well aware of their own behaviors that they may not have thought about in the past, right? Japan tends to, in pockets, you tend to have some quiet. And so you start observing people around you and you realize, how your behaviors are slightly different. So I love the story. One of IDEO's chief creative officer, Paul Bennett, he used to say, and I don't know, don't quote me on this, but he travels quite often. And, when he goes to a hotel, he just kind of, his suitcase, he just dumps it everywhere, clothes are everywhere. He just wants to kind of feel home because he travels so much. But in Japan, it made him think about, I don't want the cleaners who come in to think I'm this person when everyone else is so neat. So he then changes his own behavior to make sure he's a little bit neater and a little bit cleaner. And so I just find that kind of interesting because I think there's something about the culture where if everyone believes in those shared values, you start noticing you start reflecting on yourself and changing your own behaviors.
There's something that they call pukiyomu, which I think translates to read the air. And that's something that they imbibe, no? Like really understanding your environment and being hyper sensitive to it and being just mindful of energies and manners. So I think I think that's definitely something that that's unique there that you feel everywhere.
I mean, it's interesting to think about this too, like in terms of what Mike talked about with the US and the difference. And I'd love to hear from your thoughts about the Philippines, because definitely an example of how that plays out right now in terms of the moment we're in with COVID is mask wearing. And just as an example, right, Tokyo has always been a culture of mask wearing, simply because, people are afraid to get sick from other people. It's more like if you're sick, you want to protect other people from a cold or flu. Whereas in America, a lot of the narrative you'll see, and especially in different parts of this country, people are like, well, it's my right to not wear a mask.
Yeah.
And people saying, well, maybe this is something you could do, but I don't have to do it. And, for whatever reason, that's people's choice to understand that. But I think it says a lot about sort of the underlying values of a culture where people are very much, to your point, Paolo, like being very aware. Yeah. And I think people's awareness are more centered here, where it's like, well, what is my liberty? What is my individual right? And in Philippines, it's a little bit of a mix, right? It's interesting.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah.
It's a little bit. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
Yeah,
it is.
There definitely is a sense of, I would say, there's a sense of community and being aware of your neighbors and your surroundings here, but I think, and this is just my theory, that that we also have a switch where we can just turn that off, and then suddenly make it more about ourselves, or maybe my family, or maybe my family's more important than society at large, as opposed to being, society being the most important thing. So yeah, you're right. There I think that there is a mix of both. Both the individualist And
remember, we were under America for 50 years. So
Oh yeah, no, and Spain before that. So yeah.
yes.
yeah.
Speaking of the fact that you've been mostly stuck at home or stuck more
I don't know
stuck
what you're
at
talking
home
about.
than,
I'm in my office like Mike. Right, Mike? You're in your office.
No, totally in the office. Right.
Totally in the
See,
office.
that's totally not me.
Mike is so busy. He's
I know. I'm like, I'm here and there.
Yeah. There's always,
It's just that
if we had more mics, that would be saving the world in so many ways. We just had more mics. I like when I'm on calls like this, I like to look back as if it really is there.
That's good. That was good, Greg.
that's yeah, man. But like, what have you guys discovered about your own creativity, your own interests over the pandemic? What could be something that you did, something that you finally got to do, or a totally new discovery? Or like what we're talking about, right? Like going to Japan, suddenly it just kind of changes your behavior, makes you more aware of certain things. Well, this whole pandemic, I'm sure, has brought about certain realizations for you guys.
I've found that I actually like working from home. I don't mind it that much. It's something that's okay. And when it comes to discovery of what it is, like when it comes to creativity or when it comes to, trying to be active, I think it's been hard for everybody for sure. And we are very lucky and privileged to actually be able to work from home. Not many people, there are a lot of people in America for sure that are not in this position. So the creativity of being resilient and trying to find new ways to kind of exist in this kind of like, I feel like I'm the guy in Lost who was in the hatch, and like he just basically is doing the same thing every day. Desmond, right? Desmond. And so what I've been trying to do is like, I feel very blessed that I've been able to spend time with my family as much as I have been. Like my son is 3, so the percentage of his life seeing me every day.
Pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. So seeing him every day and my wife every day for the last 8 months has been incredible, because this is an incredible moment for us as a family. Not everybody.
Does your wife feel the same with you?
Well, yeah. That's a good question. Fair question.
We should ask him.
I don't want to say yes. I should ask her, but I think it's been because we have to split our duties, just like a lot of people, right, who have families. Like I have to work. I'm in this box, and I'm in my office, which is my bedroom, and outside my kid is doing pre-K on Zoom with his local school, with my wife helping out there. So it's been an interesting redesign of our life and our ritual a little bit. But I'm finding that we're all very resilient people, and the thing I've been trying to play with from a creative standpoint, Mike knows this, I've been doing these paintings with my son.
I see. I was going to touch on that.
I was going to bring one up because like these things, they're called peel paintings, and I make them with Oscar. And what's crazy about being in a pandemic situation is that I paid like hundreds of these things because I'm just like, it's like a ritual for us to do. And so I've seen my son pick color and do things. And I'm starting to do this thing. I have one at my desk where I'm starting to do them on different objects and like play with how I do this on bottles and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's been something I didn't ask me 8 months ago. I would never have said I would be doing these things. I'm enjoying it. So I found that's an outlet that I can turn to, which has been great. And
two things that I enjoy from your posts are that and all of your posts on whatever record you're listening to.
Oh yeah, man. I miss record shopping in Tokyo. That's one thing I do miss about Tokyo. So in Shimokitazawa, it was like 6 record shops within spitting distance. What about you, Mike? What have you been doing?
Yeah, no, it's funny because I know we're connecting this a little bit to Japan, but I think Japan really trained us a little bit for the pandemic, in the sense of I think this idea of resilience. I think there's a lot of patience and a lot of grit that you kind of need to get through it. And having experienced that a little bit in Japan, right, where things, I think a lot of things, and maybe you guys are well aware too, things take a little bit longer. You need to be a little, especially as a foreigner coming in, you need to be a lot more patient. Where we're now primed for things to kind of take a little bit longer. Greg knows this more than anyone, but when we were trying to build the IDEO Tokyo office, so much of it was about routines. So much of it was trying to instill the right kind of behaviors that we do every day, every week, every month, every quarter, every year. Yeah, in
Mm-hmm.
order to kind of start developing this culture that everyone can kind of, everyone shares, everyone abides by, and we can change it at any time, but we need to do it for at least a set period of time for it to feel like it's like a natural part of the community. And so I took inspiration from that and was thinking about my own life. And so a lot of the time, I think, during this pandemic has been just kind of really reflecting on my own life and my own routines, trying to, what are the small things that I would do on an everyday basis? It's a lot of that, it's a lot of routines. And so, and that also, it's a chance to kind of, different types of cleansing, right? And for me, one of the big things I wanted to do, and it was paired with, I think, starting a new job as well, which is weird to do it during a pandemic, but you are able to, you have a new computer. So that means you have to rethink your filing system, clean out all the junk that you had before, think about how you're going to use it in the future so things are easily searchable and findable. And so I've been trying to do that on multiple levels, and kind of like take stock again of what I have, what do you want to, the things that you're hoping to do in the future, and kind of creating the conditions for things like creativity to thrive in the future, which I think we're all aware that it's, it's one thing to be creative, but it's another thing to have the environment that enables you to be creative. And so that's been a heavy part of, I think, these last few months.
I think it was a few weeks into our extreme lockdown here. I asked our psychologist in Bootleg, because I asked him, what do you think would be the psychological effects of what's happening? And one of the things that he said was that, similar to Mike's point, is that we will be forced to reassess our routines. Because of our dependence to routines would be brought to light simply because they have been disrupted. And because of that, we would be more mindful of our routines. And on a more glass half full perspective, we would be more open to changing our routines.
Very, very few times, I think, in our lifetime are we actually forced to change or to really change our lives, right? Like other times, like we're like, oh, we want to eat less, we want to go on a diet, we want to exercise more. Like, these are things that, we try and introduce in our lives, but very few times do we, this is a very glass half full kind of comment, but very few times are we forced to actually have to rethink the way we do things, and there's no other way. And there's something about that forced nature that it can either be for good, or you can just go down a spiral. And so I think trying to think about not going down that spiral and doing things that are, that are more positive, and even small things. A story I heard is what they did with their kids is every morning, it's mom with kid, but then they would go outside and do a walk around the block. And then when the time they got back to the house, then it's mom as teacher. And that's not mom, it's not mom anymore. It's teacher mode. And then that's at the end of that, they would go outside again, walk around the block, and then back to mom again. And I feel like even simple things like that routine change, that sort of, like really instills, this different sense of like, oh, things are changing, or there's like a routine that's a little bit different. So I found that kind of fascinating. And I think it works not only for kids, but for sure for adults as well.
I just wrote that down, Mike. We're gonna try that. Okay. That's a good one. It's a really good one. I think that's a good point. Mike raised a good point about being, when we started in Tokyo and the building of that studio, trying to create rhythms and rituals is an important part of that. And it's something that I think Mike did an amazing job of helping us get to that place. What COVID has done has made us rethink, are those the right rituals for right now? And a lot of the stuff, especially when you're in this box, like, is it worth our time for all of us to get together for a full hour and sit and eat lunch together in the same place? And at first we started doing a lot of those behaviors and routines because that is what we, even in New York, we have our routines as well, but they weren't necessarily fit for the moment. And so we had to kind of readjust that. And I think Mike and I both, like you brought up moving back to the States and being in Tokyo, we've been lucky to have being forced to change our routines and our mindsets a couple of times now, right? In different countries. Yeah. I've done it in moving to China and then moving to Japan and now moving back to America. We literally have to force the way we think about our routines, how our brains work around language and the patience that it takes and resilience to do that. And then for everybody now, COVID is changing the way people have to think about their daily routines, how you think about interacting. A phrase I've used with my team is that we are not working from home. We are home at work. And so we have to change our boundaries. And I love that example, Mike, because that's where, I have a bedroom and I close my door. And when I step outside, my son's like, so are you done? Are you done with work? I'm like, that could be at 11 in the morning. He's like, sorry, are you done? And there's this whole thing where there's a separation that we've created now.
Sure.
And it's hard to navigate, but now that there's more of a routine, it's a different behavior that we have to get used to. And it may, for a lot of, at least America, but certainly for a lot of cities, our routines as a city are changing. So in New York, now we have outdoor dining, right? That has not been a thing in New York, where alfresco dining outside, because we can't go in to the dining spots. Now that's going to be more permanent. They're going to change that for when we get back from the winter time and spring. You're looking at a completely different way a city is going to operate, and the way streets are blocked off, and the way traffic moves. Like suddenly, the routine of a city has transformed because of this, and that's been really exciting for me here in New York, and seeing a massive shift in the way people behave.
Those things are, again, very interesting. Like one of the things that Pao and I have been trying to figure out, speaking of how children are growing up in these situations, as much as we are so appreciative of the fact that online education is keeping up without sacrificing the learning objectives, there are so many things that we learned by being in school and not being inside those classrooms, right? Like in between classes, when you're hanging out with friends, when you have to step up to someone picking on you, and all these things accrue to who we are now. And kids won't be going through that, right? So we've been trying to figure out a way to bring that kind of experience to children.
At least get a chance to learn those lessons in this new format, or in this new context, or whatever skill is needed to compensate for those missed moments. No? And we've been trying to figure that out.
Oh, sorry, just to interject real quick. Like, I think when we say those missed moments, it's interesting because I've had these conversations with other parents here in New York, and we talk about kids falling behind or not getting the same experience we did. I guess I'm getting comfortable with the idea that it is not about falling behind. They're advancing in ways that maybe we didn't when we were kids. So interacting with screens, traditionally people think, well, maybe that's not the best idea to have a kid at a certain age interact with screens. But my son is now on, as we speak, on Zoom calls with a class of other kids and interacting with teachers in a different way that's changing his brain of how to interact with people on the screen. Now, I can't say that's good or bad. I just know it's a skill I didn't have when I was his age.
That's true.
And, I mean, to be honest, he knows how to use the mute button way better than I do. He knows when to turn it on. So there are small skills that kids are learning, that this perception of, well, what did we go through? What made us who we are is going to be different. Yeah. And it always will be, no matter what we say. The way the media, the way that television or internet or phones or whatever, like that world is going to exist no matter what we do. And so I like to think of it more as like, what is he gaining through this whole experience? He's learning to be resilient, patient, dealing with being inside a lot, which I grew up as a latchkey kid in America, where I came home and my parents weren't home. So I found a way to entertain myself. And so there's a lot of stuff I think he's getting out of it. And to your point about like not being outside or doing all these things, there's some real innovation in the way people are starting to educate kids here. Like in New York, we have these things called forest pods, where people are going into small groups in Central Park or in Prospect Park and teaching in distributed groups that are small, and really redesigning the way people educate each other, or parents and teachers educate kids in this environment, so they still have a bit of that. But make no mistake, our kids are going to grow up whether we have anything to do with it or not, or the environment is going to change them. It's going to happen.
Good point.
My kid, when he's 20, he's going to look back and it's like, Dad, I grew up in the great pandemic of the 20s. And
that's true. Actually, I had a conversation with my kids, and I was telling them, you know what? This is an interesting time that you guys are experiencing, because we didn't grow up with something like this, and I can't even imagine if we were growing up, if it was happening 20 years ago, right, or 25 years ago, what kind of quarantine we would be going through during that time. because now it's at least you have all of these things at your disposal. But yeah, you're right.
It does make me
Good
think,
point.
and I know Greg's doing this with Oscar, but the kids, I think prior to the great pandemic of the 20s, I think, you know, we started going into screens a lot, and
Sure.
but I feel like there's a generation now that yes, they're going to be way more digitally savvy than we were ever, but there is a craving. There's going to be a craving for things outdoors, things outside, and I'm hoping that that's going to, you know, you know, it's going to be a thing now, right? It's gonna force them to. They're going to be the ones where they're going to take their kids to, you know, vacations in the outdoors and go camping, because they're so in screens all day that there is this going to be this deep human need to want to get outside and, like, you know, feel things. So
Yes, exactly.
and it makes me think about future. I think we're, you know, my work like forces us to always just think about startups, right? Just like, what are the new set of companies that are coming out? And I think, you know, we always talked about physical, digital a lot, but I do think there's going to be this new, you know, we're on the swing, right? Which is like, okay, you know, we're physical, and then now we're going super digital, physical, digital. We're going to swing into certain startups. It's all going to be about, you know, check in your phone, check in your computers. You know, you can't touch anything, because there is going to be, I think, a deep human need to be closer to nature and outdoors. So, we're seeing it with, in the Bay Area, we're seeing it with the housing market, which is like, and, you know, yes, you know, housing is going down and a lot of people are moving out, but everyone is craving space and bigger yards, right? So that they can actually spend time outdoors. And I'm just wondering how that behavior, how that thinking is going to, you know, perpetuate through other parts of our lives for the rest of the world.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Mike. I think that definitely there'll be a greater appreciation for things that are tactile, you know, real, physical experiences, and maybe even, I don't know, maybe even a sense of wanting to disconnect or lessen screen time that'll come from the kids themselves, you know.
Exactly, as opposed to the parents telling the kids to get off their screens. Yeah.
That could be the thing, you know.
One thing that I find interesting about this time that is an intention with, and I mean, you guys wonder why I play records all the time with my boy, because he loves putting the record on, putting it, you know, playing it, flipping the record, and he's at that age now where he can do that. And it's kind of like a remote control. I'm like, dude, flip the record, and he'll go flip the record, which is great. But he loves interacting with it and learning more about stuff.
Sure.
One thing I want to call out to this, though, that is interesting around physical versus digital, or outside or inside, is that we are in a really interesting state in the world. And I'd love to hear how it is in the Philippines, for sure, because, like, for me in America, loneliness and our mental health is starting to crumble. We are starting to create this environment where, because we're relegated to screens and talking to people, and even people who have families, we crave a little more human interaction that's physical. And like I said, you know, some of us may have, you know, families at home. Some of us, many of us, don't. And so this is a really interesting moment for, not just for kids, because my son is, like, you know, enjoying being inside, which I'm just like, oh, but don't you want to go out? Don't you want to go play? But imagine if you don't have that and you're on your own. Loneliness and isolation is an increasing problem. It's been an increasing problem in the world, but especially now, it's something that I'm realizing, I think a lot of us are realizing, that we have to combat that a little bit with different kinds of social activity or social connection. It's come to light a lot, and I know my colleagues at IDEO, we've been thinking a lot about mental health and emotional well-being, and we had a conversation, our CEO, Sandy Spiker, had a recent conversation with Vivek Murthy, who is the former Surgeon General of the United States under Obama, and he just put out a new book about combating loneliness, and you know, he identified like 3 types of loneliness, right? There's intimate loneliness, of having deep connection with somebody you really care about. There's the relational loneliness of friends, interactions, ways that you can, you know, socialize. And then there's a collective loneliness, like having this shared identity. And he sees these things as falling apart a little bit, and the tethering is really only connected right now mostly through digital. And that is something that needs design, actually. It needs imagination, because you know, we're going to be doing this for a lot longer than probably we want to. Here in the States, the rise of sort of telehealth and telecounseling and people being able to reach out to a psychiatrist through their phone or text. That's been an interesting piece of innovation that I've appreciated over the last 6 to 8 months, is the rise of technology being an intermediary and a medium for people to connect with healthcare. And it's something that I know we've been dealing a lot with here in New York, especially during the pandemic. You know, how does telemedicine, how do people reach out and find the care they need? And mental health is one of those things that I think all indications are pointing to the next 5 years, 10 years of innovation are going to, in healthcare, are going to focus a lot more on mental health, because I think it's coming to a fore here. And this is something that I know in America, it's that we know about the healthcare system in America. It's not ideal. And it's designed a certain way that's not allowing for people to find what they need immediately or have access. Not everybody has equal access to the kinds of care they need, nor do they have equal access to necessarily telephone, you know, the technology or the infrastructure, right? That allows them to have those conversations like this.
Paolo and I have been talking about this. We need to make the medium sing, right? I mean, we need to really maximize how all the whatever functionality Zoom may have, how can we use it to our advantage, right? Going back to the point earlier about things being tangible, for instance. I sent you my new book, right? And that book, the design got finalized, you know, right in the thick of the lockdown. So I still had a chance to just make it into an ebook. But then I realized that all the more kids need something to write on. Things, you know, like, and that's what you guys were saying, that they're learning on the screen. And people are asking me, why don't you make it into an ebook? It's easier to sell. But I was like thinking, but they need to be writing, they need to be drawing, they need to be holding something. And you know, like in my classes, I make them do some of the exercises, and then they show it to me on the video. So that kind of interactivity points to the fact that we need to make all of these technology sing, and it's really form and function. I mean, it's a cliche, right? But going back to what you're saying, Greg, it's more difficult to crack now, because it's not just a function now, right? All of these forms are hitting us at breakneck speeds.
I think more than ever, we're realizing that we can mix these mediums, these ideas now into hybrids. Like definitely the digital aspect has its benefits, but like you said, the writing of it, I mean, there's something about it being tactile, and that's even scientifically proven that taking down notes and writing them down versus typing your notes on a laptop actually aids in comprehension. So I think
not when you have notes like this, man.
Well, yeah. Where A and I are notorious for having notes and not really understanding. And just pray. We got it. But yeah, I think it's really, we're gonna see a lot of hybrids, a mix of different technologies, both old and new, and it's really understanding and being more sensitive to what are the needs and what are objectives and how do we get there, and not being so close-minded on certain mediums and things. Sorry, Mike, you were gonna say something.
No, I was gonna, in terms of mediums, I've just been really impressed. Like sometimes some of the mediums is around taking away certain sensory aspects, right? And so I've been really enjoying just the medium of voice, pure voice, because, you know, Zoom fatigue is a thing. But what I love about voice, as you know, even what you said about the psychologist, like you can hear things that you never could have, you know, you can see voices, you know, just as much. And the idea, like, you know, this is to answer another question that you had asked before, but getting really into podcasts, getting really into one of the daily routines before I go to bed is to do like a sleep meditation. So like a 5-10 minute voice sleep meditation, like these things are really powerful. And I'm just thinking, there are these other mediums during this time that I think are that we haven't really paid as much attention to, that that there's still so much opportunity and so much to design around. And so, like, speaking of mental health, I actually think meditation, self-reflection, all these things will calm, will enable people to really kind of look internally. Because I think right now the external world isn't giving us all the answers, and so a lot of it we have to figure out for ourselves. But that's a lot of pressure, and we, I think many of us were fortunate to be able to pay enough money to someone to do something, in our lives to help us. But in this case, I feel like so much of it needs to come from within, and then you realize, oh, maybe I didn't need X, Y, and Z, right? I just needed to calm my thoughts. I needed to really think through things. And so I don't know, I'm really curious. I really think mental health is going to be a big thing.
That's true.
Just connecting it to Japan, we've known before the pandemic, loneliness has already been a key thing in the Japanese culture. And I'm just wondering if there's these other mediums that can really help bridge some of those.
Just to build on something you were saying about medium and the idea of writing and the idea of listening, a story I want to tell you. There's a project we did very recently where a school district here in New York was wondering how they can activate their kids in this time of COVID and what are the ways they can connect. At the same time, there was this need from senior citizens who are feeling lonely. How can we connect the dots between kids and elders? And so we did this thing called Super Secret, where we had secret pen pals that would write letters to each other. They didn't know who they were. They would just answer several questions that were completely separate from like really how they grew up or who they were, like demographically, but more like, what was your favorite thing growing up when you were a kid? What was your favorite toy? If you were a superhero, what would it be? And so over a course of several weeks, the kids would send these letters back and forth to these adults, not knowing who they're writing to. And at the end of it, they had them design superhero costumes for each other. And at the end of it, we did Zoom calls where they revealed who the writer was. And it was such an incredible moment because that connection was formed through writing, through physical writing and sending things to the mail, like we used to do, like basically how connections were done over long distances in the past. And so some of those things are valuable and completely doable. But to Mike's point, like, I think the last time I spoke with you, Mike, was on the phone. We talked on the phone. Like, I am way more into talking on the phone these days than I am doing more one-on-one Zoom calls. I'd rather hear your voice. It gives me the chance to walk around. I can take a walk in the park.
That's true.
And it gives you some freedom. And so I think you guys are right. There's going to be this moment of evolving or elevating the basic stuff that we knew how to communicate and connect with.